The House chamber buzzed with restless energy as Representative Jasmine Crockett made her way toward the podium. The morning's debate over education funding had been charged, with party divisions drawn sharply across the aisle. C-SPAN cameras drifted across the room, capturing lawmakers alternating between quiet concentration and furtive glances at their phones. "Mr. Speaker," Crockett began, her voice calm yet commanding, "I rise today to speak on the alarming funding shortages plaguing public schools and under-resourced communities throughout the United States." She painted a vivid picture of her Texas district, where classrooms struggled within decaying buildings. Students used outdated textbooks, and special education programs operated on shoestring budgets. Pausing briefly to glance at her notes, she continued, "The measure before us proposes a 12% reduction in federal education funding compared to last year. Cuts that will most severely impact our nation's most vulnerable children." A voice sliced through the chamber before she could continue. "Will the gentlewoman yield for a question?" The cameras turned sharply toward Representative Matt Gaetz, standing smugly beside his microphone, a half-smile curving his lips. Without waiting for acknowledgement, he sneered, "I'm curious whether the gentlewoman from Texas has even read the bill she's criticizing, or if she's simply reciting Democratic talking points without grasping the math." A low ripple of reaction stirred among the members. The speaker pro tempore looked toward Crockett. "Does the gentlewoman yield?" Crockett paused, unbothered, her tone steady and even. "I yield for a question, not a speech," she replied, her composure a deliberate contrast to Gaetz's mocking tone. "My question is straightforward," Gaetz said, his voice dripping with condescension. "If the gentlewoman is so concerned about education, perhaps she can educate us on which exact page of this bill she claims to find these so-called cuts. Or did her staff hand her those lines this morning?" A hush fell over the chamber. Interruptions were nothing new in Congress, but personal jabs of that nature crossed a line unspoken yet understood. Every gaze turned toward Jasmine Crockett, waiting to see how she would respond. What happened next would dominate headlines, for weeks and forever alter Matt Gaetz's reputation on Capitol Hill before diving into the moment that reshaped the tone of Congress. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the political showdowns that mainstream networks overlook. Representatives Jasmine Crockett and Matt Gaetz embodied two vastly different approaches to political service and communication. Gaetz, elected in 2016 from Florida's 1st District, had carved out a name as a provocateur, thriving on bold sound bites and unwavering loyalty to former President Donald Trump. His reputation rested less on policymaking and more on the spectacle. He treated Congress as if it were a stage. As one political analyst quipped, "Gaetz isn't here to legislate, he's here to perform." In his multiple terms, Gaetz had introduced over 40 bills, yet only one, an unremarkable measure to rename a post office, ever became law. His influence came not through policy wins, but through his ability to dominate the media cycle with combative, headline-grabbing statements. Controversy often trailed him. He had been scrutinized in various ethics inquiries over alleged misconduct, drug use, and misuse of campaign funds, accusations he denied repeatedly. No formal charges emerged, but the cloud of scandal made him a divisive figure, even among Republicans. Crockett, on the other hand, approached governance with precision and discipline. A former civil rights attorney, she had transitioned into Congress after serving in the Texas state legislature, where her courtroom demeanor became her political weapon. "She treats the House floor like a trial," remarked a fellow lawmaker. "She comes armed with facts, anticipates counterpoints, and argues her case like a strategist, not a showman." It was this difference that put her directly in Gaetz's sights. His interruption-laden theatrics often faltered against her methodical calm. And on that morning, when the debate turned to H.R. 4762, the Educational Opportunity and Excellence Act, the clash was inevitable. The bill, introduced by Republicans, aimed to streamline federal education funding. Supporters called it a measure of efficiency. Opponents labeled it a veiled attempt to gut essential programs. As expected, both sides argued along party lines, Republicans emphasizing local control, Democrats warning of catastrophic cuts. But Crockett's remarks were different. She hadn't relied on talking points. She had read every one of the 341 pages. Her team had compiled data exposing how the bill's structure would slash resources across districts, Republican ones included. A full breakdown showed how much each district would lose, including Gaetz's own in Florida. She doesn't just make speeches, a staffer later recalled. She prepares for ambushes like a chess player planning 5 moves ahead. And that day, Gaetz had walked right into her strategy. Standing at the podium, Crockett adjusted her glasses and turned directly toward him. "I thank the gentleman from Florida for his question," she said evenly. To answer directly, "Yes, I have read this bill, all 341 pages of it." The cuts appear beginning on page 73, section 1042, and continue through page 189. They include a 22% reduction in Title I funding for low-income schools, elimination of the Striving Readers Literacy Program, and a 17% cut to special education grants. She lifted a printed report from the podium. "Here," she continued, "is a district-by-district breakdown of those cuts, including your own district, Congressman. In Escambia County, Florida, schools would lose approximately $8.2 million, directly affecting over 15,000 students." The chamber went silent. Every detail, every figure was airtight. Then, with quiet authority, Crockett pressed on. "And since the gentleman questioned whether I've read the bill, perhaps we should examine his record with it." From official committee logs, she revealed that Gaetz had missed 7 of the 9 Education and Workforce Committee meetings where the bill was debated. Murmurs rippled across the floor. "The Congressional Research Service," she continued, "confirms that the gentleman from Florida has missed 61% of all Education Committee sessions, one of the highest absentee rates in Congress." Gaetz's confident grin faded into discomfort. Crockett wasn't merely defending herself, she was dissecting his credibility piece by piece. "Furthermore," she added, her voice sharpening, "while questioning my preparation, the gentleman may wish to reflect on his own legislative record. In 7 years he has introduced no education bill that has reached a committee vote, let alone become law." A collective gasp spread through the chamber. Gaetz tried to cut in, but Crockett raised her hand slightly. "Mr. Speaker, I did not interrupt the gentleman, and I would appreciate the same courtesy." The Speaker pro tempore nodded in agreement. Gaetz sank back, visibly irritated. "What's particularly troubling," Crockett went on, "is that while this bill was being marked up, the gentleman was attending a fundraising event at Mar-a-Lago. According to FEC filings, he has held 17 fundraisers during scheduled committee meetings on education policy." Her voice remained cool and deliberate. "So when the gentleman asks if I've read the bill, the answer is yes. The more relevant question, perhaps, is whether he has." The entire tone of the room had shifted. Republican colleagues who normally applauded Gaetz's combative flair now avoided his gaze, scanning Crockett's report instead. Many realized with growing unease that the proposed cuts could harm their own voters. Sensing the tide turning, Gaetz tried to salvage the exchange. "Will the gentlewoman yield for a response?" "I yield for a question as required under House rules," Crockett replied crisply. "The gentlewoman is misrepresenting my record," Gaetz began, frustration creeping in. "I've long supported education reform." "Point of order, Mr. Speaker," Crockett interjected. The gentleman claimed to have a question. "What we're hearing appears to be a speech." "The gentlewoman is correct," the Speaker pro tempore ruled. "Does the gentleman from Florida have a specific question?" Momentarily rattled, Gaetz tried again. "My question is whether the gentlewoman acknowledges that this bill allows local school districts greater flexibility in how they allocate funds, instead of following rigid federal mandates." Crockett smiled slightly. "I appreciate that question, because it allows me to address that so-called flexibility claim directly," she replied. "This bill doesn't empower local districts, it shifts financial responsibility onto them while cutting overall federal support." She held up another page from her report. "For example, in Escambia and Santa Rosa counties, both in the gentleman's own district, maintaining current educational standards would require a 17% increase in local property taxes just to offset the federal cuts proposed here. Is that the flexibility the gentleman refers to? The choice between cutting essential services or raising taxes on his constituents?" Her precise rebuttal left little room for evasion. By focusing on Gaetz's own district, Crockett transformed a policy argument into a direct question of representation. Gaetz, now visibly uncomfortable, remained silent as she continued dissecting the bill's impact. Crockett methodically detailed how the legislation would affect rural schools, special education programs, and teacher development initiatives, citing the bill's language and supporting data. As she concluded, she stated, "Mr. Speaker, I came to Congress to solve real problems facing American families, not to perform for cameras or social media. When members interrupt colleagues without reading the legislation or attending committee sessions, they disrespect not only this institution but their constituents." Gathering her papers, she finished, "I welcome a substantive debate on education policy with any member who has actually reviewed this bill and its effects, but I cannot productively engage with interruptions from those prioritizing viral moments over genuine governance." As her time expired, there was no typical partisan applause or rebuttal, just silence. Members from both parties reflected on what they had witnessed. Not a mere disagreement, but a call for seriousness in congressional discourse. For Gaetz, the exchange was unprecedented. His trademark confrontational tactics had failed, exposing weaknesses in his record that would be difficult to explain away. The aftermath was immediate. As the House recessed for lunch, members clustered in small groups reviewing the data Crockett had cited. In the hallway, reporters surrounded her, but she offered only one statement. "I believe congressional debates should focus on substance, not performance. The American people deserve representatives who do the real work." Gaetz notably was absent. His staff told waiting journalists he had pressing meetings and would not comment. A rare silence from a representative known for embracing media attention after heated exchanges. The true turning point came unexpectedly when the session reconvened. A senior Republican on the Education and Workforce Committee requested recognition. "Mr. Speaker," the legislature said, "given the district impact data presented this morning, I believe our committee should reconvene to reconsider certain provisions of H.R. 4762 before a floor vote." This request from a member of the majority party sponsoring the bill was a remarkable validation of Crockett's critique. Several Republicans, especially those representing rural districts, echoed the sentiment. "I've reviewed Representative Crockett's analysis," said another Republican, "and the projected effects on schools in my district are troubling. I cannot in good conscience support the bill as written." The wave of reconsideration was unprecedented for legislation once expected to pass along party lines. Recognizing they no longer had the votes, the bill's sponsors agreed to send it back to committee for revision. For Gaetz, the fallout extended far beyond a single debate. Video clips of Representative Crockett methodically exposing Gaetz's poor attendance and lack of legislative achievement spread quickly across social media and major news outlets. Local newspapers in his Florida district ran front-page stories questioning his performance as their Representative Gaetz's congressional record. Under scrutiny read the headline in Pensacola's leading newspaper, which featured a detailed analysis comparing his committee attendance and accomplishments with other Florida lawmakers. The most damaging revelation was that he frequently missed education committee meetings to attend fundraisers information that deeply concerned constituents focused on school funding. Within days, his office was overwhelmed with calls and emails demanding answers. At first, Gaetz tried to brush off Crockett's criticisms as partisan attacks. But that strategy failed once the documented facts came to light. Even his usual media allies struggled to defend him against the concrete evidence of poor attendance and weak voting participation. The turning point came a week later when the district's largest teachers' association announced plans to meet with potential challengers for the next election, a major shift from their prior neutrality in Republican primaries. Realizing the threat to his re-election, Gaetz organized an emergency town hall. But instead of his trademark confidence, attendees saw a very different version of him. One who came prepared with policy proposals and spent most of the event listening to constituents rather than delivering provocative remarks. It was like he suddenly realized he actually had to do the job, not just talk about it, noted a local government teacher who attended the event. The impact of the exchange extended beyond Gaetz himself. Other members known for chasing media attention began approaching committee work and debates more seriously. Aware that the Crockett-Gaetz clash had revealed new vulnerabilities for legislators who ignored substantive work, committee chairs reported improved attendance, especially from members who'd often been absent. Several lawmakers once known for dramatic interruptions on the House floor became more restrained, offering specific policy critiques instead of general attacks. Most notably, the House Education and Workforce Committee reconvened to amend H.R. 4762, adding protections Crockett had championed. The revised bill passed with funding safeguards for Title I schools and special education programs, provisions missing from the original draft. For Crockett, the aftermath brought increased respect within Congress. Members from both parties began seeking her insight on education policy, recognizing her command of the subject. Her careful, evidence-based style became a model for new representatives, hoping to build credibility beyond partisan performance. Months later, the long-term effects became clear when new committee assignments were released. Once considered a rising star, Gaetz was removed from the Education and Workforce Committee, a clear demotion reflecting his damaged standing. His replacement, a freshman Republican and former school administrator, campaigned on prioritizing substantive education policy over political theater. The message from party leadership was unmistakable. Media theatrics might attract attention, but real influence and re-election depended on genuine work and constituent service. The confrontation between Crockett and Gaetz evolved from a viral moment into a case study in political accountability, resonating far beyond Washington. 18 months after their floor exchange, its ripple effects continued shaping congressional behavior and political discourse. For Gaetz, the fallout was severe. Crockett's challenge triggered deeper investigations into his record. Journalists uncovered a 7-year pattern of missed meetings, abandoned initiatives, and prioritizing media exposure over legislative duties. For the first time, he faced a serious primary challenger, a retired Navy officer and former school board member, who campaigned on a simple message: representation, not performance. Our district deserves someone who shows up to work. The challenger said, committee meetings aren't optional. Voting isn't optional. The real work of legislation isn't optional. Local media that once amplified Gaetz's sound bites now contrasted. His national appearances with his attendance record. The Pensacola News Journal even launched a weekly accountability report tracking all Florida representatives, committee attendance, votes, and legislative progress. When the primary votes were counted, the result shocked observers nationwide. Gaetz, who had previously won by over 30 points, lost by just 3.2%. A stunning upset in a district where incumbents rarely lose. In his concession speech, a humbled Gaetz reflected, "I came to Washington to disrupt the system, but somewhere along the way I confused disruption with distraction. My constituents have made their expectations clear." For Crockett, the outcome marked a different kind of success. Instead of using her growing profile for viral moments, she focused even more on policy work. Her office became known for in-depth policy analyses that lawmakers from both parties consulted before major votes. What Representative Crockett achieved wasn't just a tactical win in a debate, explained a congressional studies professor. She created a new model for effectiveness, one grounded in expertise, not performance. Her approach strongly influenced the next class of representatives, many of whom cited her example and promised to prioritize committee work and legislative results over media visibility. This emerging Crockett effect soon became measurable. Committee attendance rose across Congress. Floor speeches grew shorter, but more substantive, filled with policy details and bill references. Lawmakers arrived better prepared for hearings, asking informed, issue-specific questions. In the end, a single confrontation reshaped expectations within Congress, showing that while political theater might trend online, real credibility still comes from doing the work. Arriving with specific data and well-documented references instead of vague talking points marked a shift toward more substantial congressional debate. According to a longtime House parliamentarian, lawmakers are increasingly aware that in today's world of searchable records and instant fact-checking, performance without preparation exposes weaknesses. Beyond Capitol Hill, this exchange encouraged a broader reflection on democratic accountability in an era often dominated by performance-driven politics. Civic education programs even integrated footage of the Crockett-Gaetz confrontation into their media literacy lessons, using it to show the difference between persuasive speaking and genuine governance. Students must learn the difference between a representative who sounds impressive and one who actually delivers results, explained a high school government teacher. The Crockett-Gaetz exchange serves as an ideal example of why this distinction matters for meaningful democratic participation among citizens. The confrontation revealed several key lessons about effective representation in democratic systems. First, it demonstrated that solid knowledge and thorough preparation still hold power in political discussions. Even in an age ruled by short sound bites, Crockett proved that a clear command of facts and policy can outmatch even the most polished rhetoric. Second, the event showed how digital transparency and accessible information have transformed political accountability. Gaetz's committee absences and voting record, once hidden details known only to insiders, became publicly available and easily verifiable by voters. Third, it highlighted that despite deep political divides, citizens across the spectrum share common expectations about their representatives' performance. The primary loss of a strongly conservative lawmaker in a solid Republican district suggested that dedication to legislative work and constituent service can rise above ideological boundaries. Finally, the incident emphasized that in democratic systems, renewal often occurs not through dramatic revolutions, but through individual actions that gradually reshape institutional norms. One representative's commitment to substance over spectacle initiated a broader cultural shift within Congress. As a civic engagement advocate noted, this was a powerful reminder that democratic accountability depends on citizens who judge representatives by their work, not their media image. Representative Crockett proved that when showmanship meets substance, genuine governance can still prevail. 2 years later, during debate over another education funding bill, the impact of that moment became evident once more. In committee discussions, a freshman representative challenged a senior member's amendment using specific statutory details in district data mirroring the exact approach Crockett had taken against Gaetz. When a reporter asked what inspired her tactics, she replied, "I watched that Crockett-Gaetz exchange during my campaign and promised myself I'd be a Crockett, not a Gaetz." Citizens deserve representatives who actually do the work. For students of government, the Crockett-Gaetz confrontation became a case study in how democratic institutions can correct themselves when hollow performance is exposed to factual scrutiny. As polarization continues to turn politics into a team rivalry, Crockett's methodical use of evidence proved that facts can still cut through partisan noise and restore accountability built in shared public service standards. A Sohn civics teacher told her students while showing the exchange, "This is what democracy should look like. We can disagree passionately about issues, but our debates must be grounded in facts and genuine engagement with governance. When representatives focus on performance instead of substance, they fail their constituents and weaken the foundation of representative democracy." If you found this discussion on congressional accountability insightful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more content. Exploring how democratic institutions truly function. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss new videos examining the balance between political rhetoric and genuine governance, the core of a healthy democracy.